Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Lowenthal, and I'm so excited to be featured in another video of What's Happening. Thank you so much to all of the hundreds of people who are viewing, watching these videos, giving us feedback, and helping us grow. It's great to know that we are answering some really important questions out there. So today's question for Rabbi Jacobson is focused on mental health. As a society and in the Orthodox community or in the Jewish community, we have been focusing on wellness. I would say wellness is a key word that I discuss in my life, and a lot of us discuss. And it's not just adults; it's also the schools that our children go to. Yeshivas or high school. Some of them have this emphasis on mental health, some less so. But there is this concept of wellness, and we throw around terms like anxiety or depression or OCD, and there's no more stigma nowadays to see a therapist. And we talk about the medication that we're taking or that we're giving our children. And so labels and diagnoses and treatment are part of our everyday lexicon. And I guess the question is, are we damaging ourselves as a whole and also individually by this heavy focus on wellness and mental health? Are we overdoing it? Perhaps by pathologizing what should be considered normal and what should be considered everyday stresses, we're not really allowing ourselves to grow and to be able to overcome the ups and downs of life. Like, I can talk about my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, where there really was no concept of mental health or wellness, and they got through what they needed to get through. So are we pampering ourselves? Are we becoming softies or raising our children in a certain way where it's going to be harder for them? It's going to be harder for us, really, to get through life because everything has a label, and we're running to our therapist, and we're constantly ensuring that our mental health is in check. So I'd love to hear what Rabbi Jacobson has to offer. What does Torah tell us about mental health? What should we be aware of? What insights can we glean about our wellness and taking care of ourselves and our children?
Thank you very much for inviting me once again to a wonderful episode of What's Happening with this great question. And we do appreciate the feedback, so please keep it coming. Comments, critique, suggestions, questions. Please keep the questions coming. Please keep the feedback coming. It's very helpful in continuing with doing this important work. Now, this great question that you bring up. Is mental health a real issue that we should deal with? Are we overdoing it? Are we going to an extreme? Should we just drop the whole thing? Some might argue and say that this is all silly. Our grandparents never went to therapists, and they did just fine. Well, they had their ups and downs, and so do we have our ups and downs. So why are we going through this? Why are we doing? Perhaps we're taking this whole conversation. This is really unnecessary. While others will argue and say, well, look at the pain that some of us grew up with, and look at the trauma that some of us experienced and still experiencing. And if we could heal ourselves and heal our children so that the cycle doesn't continue, then we have an amazing world. So let me try to address it from from my understanding, from what Torah says, what Chassidus says, what the Rebbe says on the subject. And so, Baruch Hashem, thank God, we live in an amazing time. We live in a time unlike we've ever lived in history. It's the first time in history that we are living under such amazing conditions. If we describe to our grandparents the conditions that we live in, I think that is something that deserves attention. Some of them would say, wow, you're living in the times of Mashiach. You're living in amazing times. Thank God, materially and spiritually, we have amazing wealth at our fingertips that our grandparents perhaps couldn't even dream of. Definitely spiritually, we have so much access to so much Torah, to programs and organizations and yeshivas and all different types of learning and online learning, amazing millions and millions of hours of real good value and real good material, Torah studying available on all different types of formats and platforms, including this very podcast. And that creates a situation where some might say that you have too much time on your hands, because you're not worried about the parrots that might be breathing down your back, or this threat or that threat. Thank God for most of us that's the case. So that gives you have more time on your hands, and suddenly you start feeling aches and pains that you never would have thought of. So that's one way of looking at it, and therefore you're running to therapists. But if you would be living in more difficult times, you wouldn't even be thinking about it. So it's almost a curse of living in such amazing times. That's one way of looking at things. But even if this is the case, so the question is how to properly deal with it. What should be the proper approach? Should we just disregard our aches and pains? Should we act as if it's not there? Or should we take on, no, this is very healthy, and we should just do what's available out there. We should start using the same lingo as what the street is using, because that in a certain way reflects our reality, and reflects the reality the way we see it. So what's the problem with that? So this is, again, one way of looking at this issue. Our podcast is called What's Happening because we try to uncover tell the real story. What's really going on? What's really happening? We mentioned in the past the words of the Rebbe that we're about to experience a Geula. We're living in, so to speak, the twilight zone, the final moments of Golus and the first moments of Geula. And sometimes it feels more like the latter. And sometimes it feels more like Golus, and sometimes it feels more like Geula. And the objective of our generation is to bring us over that finish line, to bring us over that point, to a point that we live a life of redemption. We live a life of healing, of being healed, that we are at peace with ourselves. We're at peace with the world around us. We're a little while after Hanukkah, after Yutas Kislev. The whole idea of Chassidus is that Yutas Kislev, we focus on the idea of Pada b'shalom nafshi, that you redeem my soul in peace, with peace. Peace is a fundamental point of Chassidus. Redemption is is where we're headed, not just because that was the original plan that Hashem intended for the world to be, but the whole purpose of the world is to bring us to a time of perfection and peace. And throughout history, for decades, for millennia, there were different elements that didn't allow us to experience this peace, that didn't allow us to experience this equilibrium, or this balance, this harmony in life, because we were busy running, we were busy trying to survive, and that was in a way we were stuck in Golos. And there were certain tzaddikim that lived a life of redemption. They lived a life of peace. They lived a life of perfection, even while in Golos, they were able to raise themselves above that. But for most of us, we're just trying to survive. And how do you survive in such difficult times, with difficult challenges? But as we progress to the time of redemption, we progress to the time of when we're going to experience the complete and true redemption with Mashiach, we have to take care of those final issues that don't let us, that pull us back into exile, that pull us back into trauma, pull us back into pain, into challenge, into difficulty, into disappointment, into pain. Not as a curse because we're so weak, but because we have such an amazing blessing that we're living at the time of redemption. There's some things that we still have to finalize. We still have to clear up those minor issues before we can be perfectly redeemed. An example: if you have a home that is in total chaos, total disarray, so at first you don't focus on when there's complete chaos. You're not going to start dealing with the little discolorations on the walls, or the imperfections in the painting or the wallpaper, because it's just a total mess. First, you take care of the major issues, and then when the house is just before it's ready, I know someone that's doing construction on their home, so they can probably relate. You know, when just before it's ready, then you start focusing on the details. Oh, the lighting over here is like this. We need to have a different shade of the lighting. Is it an issue? Is it not an issue? Or you know, this color, that color. The minor issues are the final steps before you can actually move into the house. And I think that's the story of what's going on now. We're living in this time of amazing, amazing blessing, to the point that we have the luxury of focusing on these issues that our grandparents didn't have the luxury of focusing on. They were trying to survive. They were trying to just make it. As long as they were able to breathe, and as long as they were living, that was a successful day. As we move closer and we're about to experience the completed and true redemption, we have to deal with the small stuff, the pesky little details that annoy us. So it's dealing with them. So now the question is how to deal with them. And the question is what happens, and this is the constant tension that we experience in Golus. On the one hand, we have to deal with, we're immersed in this material world, but on the other hand, we can't allow for that to take over our life. So we have to eat. Every single one of us has to eat. But sometimes, unfortunately, we can get carried away with our food. We have to take care of ourselves in many different areas. We all need to have sleep. We all need to have some exercise. We all need to have, there are different physical elements of our life that we need to engage in. That's how Hashem created us. But it's a tragedy if, God forbid, we get caught up in it, and that takes over our life. The tragedy is that we lose our focus. We lost our focus. That what's our purpose in our and why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing. So yes, I should be eating, but that should not be the focus of my life, and that should not be the excitement of a life and living for having another meal. My life should be for something greater, for a greater purpose, for greater meaning, for a greater achievement. In order to get there, I need to have fuel in my body, absolutely. So I'll make sure that I have fuel in my body. But am I living for the food? Is my whole focus, my whole drive the food? And this is true with many different areas of life that we need to deal with. But that's not necessarily the focus. That should not be the focus. So what should we live with? We have to recognize the time that we're living in, as I just mentioned, that we're living in a time of, we're about to experience a complete and true redemption, and we are the ones to make it happen, that we should bring about redemption by us living a more godly, purposeful, meaningful life, a holy life, and by us encouraging those that we come in contact with to do the same. When I say purposeful and meaningful, that means a life of peace. That means a life of confidence. That means a life of humility. It means a life of caring, of giving, of compassion. This is redemption. This is pure life. This is real life the way it was meant to be. So this is our mission, to live a life of redemption and to try to bring about redemption. Sometimes there's something in our way. Sometimes there's pain that we experience, whether God-made or man-made. Sometimes we go through different things. Sometimes we have impulses. Sometimes there are different things that we struggle with. And they might get in our way. So if we can live life and focus on our mission and know those things exist, but if they don't get in our way and they don't interfere in our life and they don't interfere with the way we parent and the way we are, the spouse that we are, and the family member that we are, and the friend that we are, the community member that we are, that's fine. But if we realize, and when we realize, that there's an issue that is that pesky little issue that just won't go away and keeps on coming up again and keeps on interfering with our life, and interferes with our life of redemption, with our life of serving Hashem, then it must be dealt with. How to deal with it? Yeah. We have to deal with it by perhaps speaking to therapists, perhaps by taking medication, and the same thing is also when we see a family member, whether it's a child or a friend or anybody else that is struggling with something. It is horrible. Sometimes there's this Western attitude, well, that's their life, it's not my life. No, if we see somebody struggling, it's our responsibility to say something, to try to help, to try to do. There was a fellow originally from Toronto that passed away just recently, had shared that he grew up, his family was a modern Orthodox family, and in 1954, his parents enrolled him in the Chabad yeshiva in New York. And he had a terrible stutter as a teenager. It was customary back then that one would go in to have a private audience, a yichidus, with the Rebbe on their birthday. And this fellow described that when he went into the Rebbe for his 16th birthday, 1954, the Rebbe had a lengthy conversation with him, asking him about his life and his struggles, and at the end of the conversation, the Rebbe asked him, "Could I help you with anything?" And it appears that the Rebbe was referring to his stutter, without telling him that, is there anything I could do to help you with your stutter? So he said to the Rebbe, "No, you can't help me. There's nothing you could do." And the Rebbe said to him, "But I could try." The story continues, but to me, this story is very significant. The Rebbe's life is about redemption, living redemption, and trying to bring about redemption. And I think that in this little exchange, we have a glimpse of what it means to live redemption and to try to bring redemption. You see a teenager stuttering. Could you help? Perhaps you could, perhaps you can't, but you could definitely, and you must, try. What could you do about it? The Rebbe suggested that he go speak to a speech therapist. He felt that there's no point to speaking to a therapist, but the Rebbe followed up with him, and again, at a later point, the Rebbe asked him again, "Did you see a speech therapist?" Sometimes, and not sometimes, this is part of redemption. This is part of our God-given mission, is that we should make this world a peaceful world, a happy world, a world that is at peace with itself and its surroundings. A world that is focused, that is energized, that is vitalized by godliness and holiness, which means humility and kindness and focus and determination, activity. And we have to be the ones to make it happen. To say that we should not speak to therapists, or we should not not enjoy the great benefit of medicine, is absolutely foolish, is silly. It's terrible to do that, because Hashem gives us amazing treasures, and it would be terrible to reject them or ignore them just because of what? It's part of Hashem's plan, and it's part of God's plan, and part of God's gifts that Hashem gives us, especially as we come close to the complete and true redemption. Hashem gives us tools. Hashem gives us people that can help us achieve redemption. But once again, just like with food, just like with any other step that we need to take in order to achieve true peace, we can't get stuck with that. We can't get stuck with a medication. We can't get stuck with the labels. We can't get stuck with, if it's part of a process and part of a progression of what could I do to serve Hashem better? What could I do to be a more giving person in society? What could I do to be a healthier person in society? Yeah, fine. So sometimes I need to go through certain steps, and it's fine. For us to become obsessed with that and to become fully focused on that and for that to become our drive is just losing focus of who and what we are, and that's a terrible tragedy. So the problem is not these great benefits that we have. The problem is if we get stuck in them. The problem is not if labels help us achieve our goal. So with regards to our children, our goal is to raise children that are independent and energetic and confident and have a sense of responsibility, a sense of caring, a sense of compassion, children that are happy, that recognize their value and know who they are, know what their purpose is. Sometimes there's something bothering a child, or something could be in the way of a child that holds them back from realizing these promises and the gifts that they have. And it would be terrible for us as parents to withhold any type of help that we could give them. So we must give them those great gifts. God forbid to get stuck in them, because that's just losing focus of the plan. It's our great responsibility and honor to partner with Hashem to make this world a world of perfection, a world of peace, a world of redemption. And we should utilize the gifts that He gave us to achieve that, and not get stuck with those tools, but to use them to propel us and to, as a springboard, to bring this world to where it's meant to be: peace, safety, happiness, security, all things good for all good people around the world. Thank you.